So this last week was difficult. Um, my wife's grandmother passed away on Saturday, and I found out later that the day before that, on Friday, a guy named Sam, who I worked with for 12 years at the Dallas Morning News, he passed away too. So in 2 days, I lost a couple of people. Now, my wife's grandmother, she was 96 years old. She was on her way to 97. It wasn't too much of a shock. We actually just found out, like the week before, we just found out that she had been put in hospice. But apparently she was in hospice for a couple of months, and my wife had no idea. That's the whole thing. Don't need to go into it. But anyway, just old age. She was 96 years old. You can't cry too much for somebody who had a run like that. But it was particularly difficult on my wife. She grew up in a split household, and a lot of times in families like that, the grandparents take on a larger role. She and her grandmother were really close, and they traveled a lot when she was a kid, and she saw her regularly, and so that was why it was kind of a shock when we found out that she had been in the hospice for a while. We had no idea. But anyway, that was her grandmother. But Sam is somebody that I worked with, like I said, for 12 years at the Dallas Morning News. And it probably shouldn't have been too much of a surprise. It wasn't too much of a surprise, because the entire time that I've known him, and I left the Dallas Morning News in 2017, so maybe 15 years, yeah. The entire time that I've known him, he has cancer. He has had cancer. And it's a type of cancer that I don't remember the specific name of it. It was a type of thyroid cancer that metastasized and showed up in different parts of his body. But it was a type of cancer that didn't respond to chemo. So he described it as death by 1,000 cuts. It was just whack-a-mole. Every time a tumor came up, they had to go in and take it out. And he was just constantly having surgeries and constantly radiation as well. So it was surgery and radiation just all the time with him. He actually had a place that he stayed in Houston. Part of the reason I imagine that he survived as long as he did was because he had pretty much the best care in the world when it comes to cancer. He was down at MD Anderson in Houston. He lived up here in Dallas, but he went down to Houston all the time for treatments, and his doctors were down there. He literally had a place that he just stayed when he was down there. And partly was because it was a rare type of cancer. And I think he said that, I know that at one point he became the longest living person with this particular type of cancer. And they were toward the end there just throwing everything at it that they could come up with. There were all kinds of new immunotherapy options that they were trying. And so he kind of became a bit of a guinea pig. So that's why he got such good care, and probably why he lasted as long as he did. And God bless him, he probably helped push the knowledge of this particular type of cancer, and the therapies that were being used on him probably gave all kinds of data that could be applied to other people. Sam was a really, really great guy. He helped me out. He was a designer at the paper, and I was a copywriter, so we worked together all the time. I mean, every day for 12 years. This guy was like, he actually had a desk right next to me for a good part of that time. And we went to lunch together. We hung out afterwards. When I started Canker Boy, he designed the branding for it. Yeah. So that logo right there, that's Sam. He did that. He designed this whole label that's on there. He did a lot of the branding and design work that wound up on the website. And he helped me out in a lot of ways, and we were birds of a feather in the sense that he was also pretty entrepreneurial. He was a designer, but he was also a bit of he had an engineer's mind, I suppose. Like, he was always looking for problems to solve. And some of his solutions seem to be more complicated than necessary for me anyway. But he was always coming up with products. He had this exercise thing that he designed that was like a ropes thing that could go over a door, and he could exercise with it. He had He had a dog walking stick that could be used. And all, he was always telling me about it, but I never actually saw that. And he even had this thing that was, I forgot what he called it. I think he called it the monkey knot, but it was basically a rope that was tied into a ball. He put that on his backpack and he used it to just kind of like hold on to, and it kind of like helped take some of the weight off of his shoulder. He just came up with all these uses for it. He was a really inventive guy. He would, he rode the train to work and he would like wrap it around the pole so he wouldn't like be holding on to this germ infested pole. And as somebody with cancer, I'm sure he was probably a little bit more of a germaphobe than most, but the hand hold thing like above, he would throw it over that and hold on to it like that. And just holding on to it would take the pressure off of his shoulders and made it easier to carry around. But he was always coming up with ideas like this. And I think he and I bonded over that because I was always giving him ideas and ways that he could, market those things and promote them. And he was really into the branding of things and naming of things. And he helped me out with my stuff. So we worked together in a lot of ways, not only in work, but outside of work. After I left the Dallas Morning News, obviously the amount of time that I saw him went down quite a bit, but we would still get together and have lunches and have breakfast and stuff. And of course, after COVID hit, he really had to go into like severe quarantine. He couldn't take the risk of getting that because that would basically be a death sentence. He was starting to get into pretty bad shape this last year anyway. The last time I saw him, he actually had a tube in his throat. I don't remember exactly why. I think they had to go in and do some kind of surgery around here. He had multiple surgeries on his neck, so it was kind of like, concave on one side. But the thing about him is it was almost frustrating that I never knew exactly how bad things were for him. Because no matter what the situation was, he would say it with a smile and a joke and just kind of blew it off. And maybe that comes from having cancer for 16 years. Maybe that just comes with just having that mortality issue hanging over your head for 16 years. After a while, you just kind of like make a joke out of it and move on. I don't know if that's stoicism or bravery. I remember one time he was having to have surgery, a second surgery on his liver, which they had already removed like a third of his liver at one point. And he showed me the scar. It was like this huge, it was like they just opened him up, obviously. But I mean, like it was a huge scar along his side. But he was telling me he had to have this surgery on his liver, and he was just like, yeah, whatever, it's no big deal. No matter how bad things were. Oh my God. Yeah. The last time that I saw him and he had that tube in his throat, just before we left, I said, I was always like, so are the treatments getting better? Is it working? It was because like I said, they were just throwing spaghetti at the wall with him. It was just like, let's just see what we can do. But he listed, I think he had a tumor on his spine. He had a tumor on his heart. There was one on his lung. There was another one on his liver. There was one, I think there might've been one in his brain somewhere. I mean, he had probably 8, 9, 10 tumors. And they were just throwing the book at it. They were just doing whatever they could. And he just said it like it was nothing. He said it like you or I would be like, yeah, I got to go see my mom tomorrow or something. Just like a thing. Just, whatever. And it wasn't actually the cancer that did him in the end. It was pneumonia. And I imagine he, with that tube in his throat, it may have gotten infected. I was in touch with his daughter because his daughter was a customer of mine on Canker Boy, so I had her email, and I reached out and gave her my condolences, and she was like, yeah, it shouldn't be shocking when somebody with 16 years of cancer dies, but we didn't see it coming. It was just a thing that happened out of nowhere. And she said that it happened so fast that literally he had ordered, he was in a hospital, but he had ordered lunch. And before the lunch got there, he just slipped away. So I guess that's a relief that he didn't like suffer for too long, unless you count 16 years of having cancer or suffering. But I don't think Sam considered it suffering. It was just the life he was given, and he just made the most of it, did the best with it. I'm talking about this partly just because it is something that's going on with me, and I just kind of wanted to put that out there. And I've learned a lot from knowing Sam in all those ways that I just described. But I also learned some things from being around Sam that aren't as flattering, I guess. And this is in no way meant to disparage his memory or anything. But he also served as a bit of a cautionary tale for me because, like I said, we both had all these ideas for entrepreneurial things, but he had all these ideas and he never really did anything with any of them. And that was also sort of a frustrating thing for me. I'm sure when you have cancer and your life depends on having insurance, that kind of prevents you from doing any wild moves like quitting your job to go, sell some product online. And I fully respect that. But, he eventually got laid off from that job, which was not a surprise. They were having layoffs every 6 months, around the time that I left. And I remember him being in an absolute panic when that happened. He was, of course, it was like a death sentence for him. And he eventually found another job. And, but he came to me in a panic because he was like, I've got to do something with these ideas. I've got to put them out there. And of course, at that point I was like, of course I would have done anything to help him out. And I actually kind of offered him Canker Boy at one point. I was like, you can just take Canker Boy if you want. Because at that point I was doing well enough on YouTube that I didn't need the Canker Boy money. So I was, but he turned that down. The thing about him was, I think this spoke to a fear that he had going on the inside, and while his situation was very specific with the cancer and everything, I think this is true for a lot of people. And it's definitely been true of me at various times in my life, but he had this fear about really putting these ideas out there and really going for it and investing in it, with time and money and effort and all that stuff. He shied away from it. He always backed off. I remember he would say, well, I need to get this patented first. I need to get it patented. And I'd be like, why do you need to get it patented? And his response was, because that's the first thing they ask on Shark Tank. I'm like, it's a TV show, dude. Like, just put it out there. And I remember at one point, like, being so frustrated with it that I literally sat down. I was like, look, tonight, I want you to go and just set up a store on Etsy. It literally takes 30 minutes. Just go set it up and put that little knot thing that you do on there. And I actually shot a video for him to show how this thing works and all the little things that you can do with it. And I was like, just put that up on Etsy. Just start there. Take that first little step. And he didn't do it. And he wound up dying with none of these ideas ever really going anywhere. And that's, as a friend, it was extremely frustrating. But in general, it's tragic. It's a bit of a, he's a cautionary tale. I've noticed, and again, I'm guilty of this myself at various times in my life. We tend to put hurdles up in front of ourselves, almost as a preventative way of keeping us from having the hurt of something failing. Let's just sabotage it in the first place. This is all very subconscious mental stuff. I've done that with film stuff. I never really put the time and effort that I should have into like my screenwriting career. I never moved out to LA. I never sat down and just made phone call after phone call after phone call for days on end to agents and managers and stuff. I never really did that. I kept putting a hurdle up in front of myself. And luckily I didn't really do that with YouTube or with Canker Boy and several other things. I tried several things before YouTube and Canker Boy finally became a thing. And I failed at them over and over and over again. I got used to it after a while. And I think it was that sort of fear of failure that guaranteed the failure with the things that Sam wanted to do. We have a tendency to, like, life is hard enough and there's enough hurdles in front of us, and yet we subconsciously put more hurdles up in front of ourselves and make it even harder. It's a weird form of self-sabotage, and I got to have a front row seat to it. And it was frustrating and it was painful to watch. And to watch him do like the mental gymnastics required to Just shoot down little things like just setting up an Etsy account, little things like that. Just take one little step. It was something that he was too afraid to do. And again, when you have that cancer diagnosis hanging over your head all the time, I'm sure that adds a level of fear and mental blockage that can't be ignored. But anyway, all of this is to say that Sam was a great guy, and I feel like he missed an opportunity to do some really great things because he, let that self-sabotage, unconscious stuff get in the way. So that's the cautionary tale of his life that I want to pass on to everybody else. If there's an idea that you want to pursue, if there's an idea that you want to explore, take whatever baby step you need to take before you go to bed tonight, just to make that first tiny little step. And then tomorrow make another tiny little step. And be okay with failing. Having tried it and failed is not really a failure because you learn stuff from it, stuff that you can apply to something later on that might not be a failure because you learned something the first time. But you can't learn anything from it if you don't allow yourself to fail a little. Anyway. So those are the things on my mind regarding Sam, but he'll be missed. He was a truly great guy, and not just in all the ways I described. I mean, he worked in soup kitchens and did volunteer work and worked for homeless charities and all that selfless stuff that frankly I could be doing more of myself. But anyway, say hi to a friend that you haven't talked to in a while, because especially these days, you just never know. And I'll leave it with that. So, hope you guys are doing well. I hope that was useful to some of you. And Zoe's barking at someone at the door, so I guess I need to go and look at that. All right. Thanks, you guys. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Love you guys. Talk to you later.